Lesson at 10.3. Welcome, grade 7s. This is all about Prince Edward Island joining Confederation. What caused them to join Confederation, and what were some of the consequences? So stick around and let's learn something. Ten point three is the lesson. Like I said, what factors led to Prince Edward Island joining Confederation? They do join Confederation, it's no surprise. They were in the initial talks of joining Confederation of the creation of Canada in 1867, but they decided not to. However, times change, and their minds over time, they began to change as well. So they rejected the original idea of Confederation because they wanted more money to join, and they wanted more members of Parliament to represent them. The other colonies were not willing to compromise on those two ideas, so they rejected joining Confederation. But they had a change of mind. Things change over time. It's no surprise. Some of the things that were causing them to change their mind was how the land was owned in Prince Edward Island. The land that was in Prince Edward Island was owned by British landlords who were not even there on the island. And the islanders were having to pay rent to these landowners that didn't even live there. If Prince Edward Island joins Confederation, then Canada would end up buying the land off of them and selling it back to the islanders to live. So that's a pretty good idea. In 1871, Prince Edward Island, seeing what all the other the communities are doing around them in the provinces and the government of Canada, even the United States, see what they're doing, they decide to build a railway across the island. Problem is that the railway is going to be very expensive. But if they join Confederation, Canada agrees to pay for that railway. Well, that's an awesome deal, because that's going to be more money for the islanders. Prince Edward Island, they wanted to trade with the United States, but because they were a colony of Britain, the British refused to allow them trading with the US. But if they joined Canada, then they can trade with the United States. So that's a pretty good deal. And to be honest, Britain wanted the colony gone. And Canada was worried that the United States would take Prince Edward Island off of the hands of the British. So even though the British wanted the colony gone, they didn't want to give it to the United States. They weren't happy about that. So Canada and the British pressure Prince Edward Island to join Confederation. So there was a lot of things working in the favor of the islanders to join Canada. So guess what happens? Well, just like in BC, in Prince Edward Island, in 1873, the officials from there, they head over to Ottawa, and they present their list of demands to the Canadian government. Number one, Canada is going to pay all of the debts for Prince Edward Island. Like British Columbia, they are going to receive an annual payment from Canada. Like British Columbia, they are going to get a railway built. And the Canadian government is going to provide year-round steamboat service between the island and the mainland. The government of Canada will give Prince Edward Island 6 members of parliament, which is a really good deal, and they agree to buy back the land from those absentee landowners that are living in Britain. So, July 1st, 1873, these terms look really good, and it's official. Prince Edward Island becomes Canada's 7th province. But who remembers back in the earlier chapters, Prince Edward Island was also home to the Acadians as well. It was originally called Île Saint-Jean, where 200 French lived. They had a really good relationship with the Themikma First Nation that lived there. And within 35 years, the Acadian population expands to about 5,000. So that's pretty good. But we remember what happened in the mid-1700s. The Acadians were deported, and this is just a review, but a third died of disease or drowning during this deportation, and another 2,000 escaped. they went and fled into the southern states. They went down in and around Louisiana. So in 1867, when Canada became a country, there was a small population of Acadians that made their way back afterwards. They were a small population, but they were a very active population. So active, in fact, that today, 12% of the current population can trace their roots back to those of Acadians. Now, I mentioned the Mi'kmaq that are in Prince Edward Island. Well, we're going to talk about the Mi'kmaq now. In 1767, the British government divides the island into 67 townships, and a lottery is then held to give land to British landowners. The problem is that this land is on traditional Mi'kmaq territory. So by the 1800s, the early 1800s, only 300 Mi'kmaq remain. The rest either died or they head out west and they left their traditional lands. But not all of that land that the British divided into those 67 townships was actually in this lottery for the British people to win. The island off of the north coast was overlooked. So in 1834, knowing this, an Englishman by the name of David Stewart purchases this land to protect the Mi'kmaq. And this land gets transferred to Mi'kmaq ownership in 1912, where they can have this island all on their own. The problem was that there were no treaties with Canada, and therefore the Mi'kmaq, their needs were not looked after by the Canadian government. And we've learned about the treaties before and what the treaties were supposed to be for First Nations, and these Mi'kmaq on this island were not given the opportunity to enter into those treaties. Let's take a minute to talk about this individual. This is William Henry Pope. He was a lawyer, he was a politician, and he was a newspaper editor. A newspaper editor is going to be a really important role back during this time in Canada's history. There was no internet, there was no Twitter, there was no Instagram, no TikTok, none of that kind of stuff. So people had to get their opinions from newspapers. So a newspaper editor is going to be a really important role. He was a strong supporter of Confederation back in the beginning of the Confederation talks in the 1860s. But very few people from Prince Edward Island actually agreed with William Henry Pope. And he quits politics in 1867 because he was disgusted by PEI not joining Confederation. So he switches his efforts to writing editorials and giving lectures. But he stays close with John A. Macdonald. He keeps close ties with him. And John A. Macdonald really wanted Prince Edward Island to join Confederation. And with the help of William Henry Pope, he was able to change many minds of the islanders so that when they did finally decide to enter into Confederation, many of them chose to vote to join Confederation because of this guy. All right, head over to your workbook and complete the questions for this part of the chapter.